Yeah, thank you. So welcome back to those watching online. So the final piece of our agenda today is corporate services. We were going to be having a bit of a chat about climate change and principles, but what we've decided to do is we'll just set that aside for another workshop when we've got a full council representation. So corporate services, so that's Patricia and Joe, welcome.
Thank you. So hopefully my clicker's going to work.
Is it easier we just say no now?
No. Yeah, that'll work.
We just say no.
So
We're just giving you lunch.
We love you as long as you don't want any more money.
I can't.
Oh,
It's like
I think the first piece of that conversation would worry them more than the second, to be frank.
Well, if you've lived 10 years without IT, why do you need any more? Yeah.
So the corporate services activity is really everything else that council does that you haven't seen an activity plan for already. So it would often be called the back office sort of functions. So we've split it out into the functions that are taken. So there's the people aspect, whether that be it includes the wellbeing and our change culture through our customer services and our strategic comms, finance, which is we've got a financial services team and procurement team as well. Information and technology. That's in our management of information and our information services. And then we've got risk and improvement. So risk teams, continuous improvement and quality team, and health and safety. So really it's covering, and so it covers a real range of activities, but it supports and enables the delivery of those really core council functions. Making sure we can support the teams putting water through the pipes, collecting the water, making the roads safe. So that's more an enabling and supporting function. And then you've got the other aspects there, like we collect the rates, we set the rates, we also make sure everyone gets paid, whether they're a supplier or a staff member. So there is it's a real range. We have created a separate activity within general services. So in many other councils, they don't have this as a separate activity. It's sort of all washed out into the other main ones. We've done that so you can see the transparency about how much it takes to run the operation. So from a strategic priorities and community needs, the most relevant ones there is meeting the changing needs of our population and making sure we deliver our services in a way that meets those changing needs and supporting and enabling that. Within here, we've supported the City renewal, we're enabling and supporting a whole heap of other things as well. But the key issues for the activity sit in the digital transformation space. We need to transform our business to meet both the business needs as well as the community expectations that they expect us to be able to do things digitally that we can't at the moment. And the really good example of this was the expectation the community had that they should have been able to receive their rates invoices by email. We have now been able to do that, but our technology did not allow us to do that within it. We had to go and find another technology that would talk to it to be able to do that. But, and this is probably Joe's favourite thing, we need service simplicity, agility and reliability, both internally and externally.
That means the customer are able to deal with this how they choose in the most convenient way.
So just on those strategic priorities, does it capture some of that discussion we had prior to lunch around, I suppose it's social, political type pieces, sort of that secular nature of our society, how that's evolving?
It's probably not as relevant for this activity as probably it is for the democratic process.
You reckon?
But it does cover off things like the call centre, the emails coming through to us, so how information comes to us as council.
Yeah.
And a lot of those areas are covered in those as well.
So it is captured. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Good
Yes,
afternoon.
Chair, good afternoon. Regarding invoicing, whether it be in a letter or digital, where are we set for taking on the task of invoicing for the new entity, Three Waters? Because I believe we are the invoicing agent when changeover happens. Is that something that we need to think about, or?
Yeah, it is something that we are thinking about. It will be a challenge. That's why we've always said we didn't want to do it.
No, and who's? I'm just wondering about the expense of the challenge. The expense would be at the, I guess it's our own expense either way, whether the entity pays or.
Bet it doesn't work out as well for
We
us.
work on commission.
I would be hoping we would work on commission, and that's what happens in many other councils around the country who have rates collection or regional councils where it's done on
Because
on
in
admin fee.
yeah, in Scotland, even though and they've done a complete full transition now with their, this is where all the Three Waters started, and the council invoicing was a permanent thing. In Scotland, the entity who ran the water never did any invoicing, full stop. So that's something to think about, that you could keep on doing.
We have already got that on the radar.
Yeah.
Michael, at CE level, was there some sort of discussion around how that is evolving, or is it just the invoicing piece?
Through yourself, Chair, from an invoicing perspective, we've been very, I think, direct in relation to our position of that, and that we wanted to be separate, quite separate in relation to the invoicing component. I think
Is that a view that's consistently held through the C network? Or?
It's mixed, but I think there is a unified view that we do want that separated later down the track. And there's quite an acknowledgement there will be a transition period. We just wanted to make it very clear that we want that transition period to be as short as possible, because we don't want the confusion between what's the increase in cost being imposed through the entity as opposed to the rates increase that they might experience from a council.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, just to reinforce that, I guess most of the voices I hear want us to differentiate away from the collection of rates for Three Waters on two levels. The government are saying clearly that for the next, they say the short to medium term, whatever that means, that we will continue to collect the water rates or the Three Water rates. The downside of it is that most councils actually don't want that to be included in the overall rate take for us and then separated out. They want it separated out before it's sent out. So you're basically getting two rate bills. So that then the question is why is my water rates gone from 800 to 1200 overnight? Then you can say, well, you need to talk to the entity about that. You don't need to be talking to your local council.
Yeah, that's right.
So I'm not sure there's an answer to that yet. Wish there was, but don't have that.
Yeah, there's a few issues. Okay. Sorry.
But it is a problem.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so from a current budget, the operational expenditure is sitting around the $14 million. Predominantly that is in people, but a lot of it is in services. So that's taking us currently 102 FTE to operate these support activities. And it's a significant chunk of council across this all. From a capital expenditure, is that includes a lot of that is predominantly in our IT space. So your laptops, iPads, networks, and the like. In relation to maintaining our levels of service, the biggest push in this is about getting council's digital resources up to speed. There's as we all know, there's a large technology curve. Our systems are well behind that curve, and we need to start moving back up the curve to be much toward, not at the coalface, just behind it. So there is a lot of activity in that, and that's probably the biggest request that will come through in the budget bids that you'll see later. That is the cost of getting to that point. We need to be making information and data easy to access and to use, both to enable external people to access our data and use it, but also the internal council services, so that they can get the data that they need easily and can use it and interpret it. And even to maintain their current levels of service, resourcing is a real challenge. It's getting the right people at the right level within our budget parameters into Invercargill, especially within our information technology, information services, and even finance fields. Getting those right skills is a challenge. And probably the biggest challenge to the activity is continuing to ensure that the rest of the internal council business and staff are supported and their obligations that we have met. Opportunities for cost savings. No direct opportunities have been identified. However, we're continuing to look for improvements in both our processes and our systems that will result in efficiency gains in decision making and improved capacity, and should support better value and purchase deals. So while we won't see significant cost savings within this activity, we should be able to constrain costs rather than look for big savings. Now, on the options for council to consider, the most significant to be advanced is the implementation of our ERP technology solution. So council's already decided that it wants to go down an ERP technology, and we've selected that, and bring in most of our operational systems and data onto a single platform. The cost to do that implementation is currently still being worked through. That's the current estimate, but it could be a little bit more. This is to actually get it up and running. Licensing is one factor. Implementing the system, getting our data working is probably the biggest part, and changing our systems internally to allow that. So that's where we sit there. The other aspect is in relation to the corporate fleet. So our fleet sits, with the exception of the parks fleet, sits within this activity. So that's the vehicles that you see signed written with Invercargill City Council. We've got a strategy present to move the corporate fleet as it goes through renewal to hybrids where hybrids are available. At the moment, we haven't moved to going to more electric. We do have some electric within the fleet because of the restrictions on charging capacity in the area. But it's whether we get the direction from council through this is to move to go to electric from the hybrid, and we would just do that within their existing renewal budget. But at the moment, we've just stayed in that 1 foot on either side of the fence and stayed with hybrids before moving to go to that electric option.
Just with the contemplation of electric, does council do an exercise to be fully aware of the end of life of an electric vehicle and where it goes? I mean, you just don't want to go, I don't care, but obviously are we worried about end of life electric vehicle and where does it go?
We haven't as yet, but our one vehicle is getting closer to its end of life, and we are thinking about whether that is the best way. And that's part of the reasons why we haven't jumped into electric already, was the charging and the whole of life.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, it'd be a tough one to do. I mean, how are you going to find out? No one's going to give you a straight answer.
No, and because we tend to not hold them till the end of life.
So there's one more user. Yeah.
Or several.
Or several.
So we do deal with it.
It's an appreciation.
We make it someone else's problem.
Oh yeah, no, but we should still be thinking about it.
You're looking for a car?
I agree.
You mean a golf cart?
Barry?
Yeah. Are we looking at bus fleet as well?
for this?
So within this activity, the bus fleet doesn't sit within this. That sits within the public transport activity. And I know they are thinking at that.
So a couple of questions on their technology piece. Contract a partner that we're working with to deliver that program, because we have got a partner that's delivering that for us.
We are still in the early procurement of a full partner for the full.
Yeah. Okay. So will that contract include, will they just deliver it and then leave, or will they stay on to make sure we reap the efficiencies and benefits of their technology platform?
That's still to be negotiated through, but we have as an outcome, we would be looking to make sure that we have reaped all the benefits that we were looking for.
Yeah. So will the contract will have warranties in it around their proof of use and all those sorts of good stuff?
There should be some of those. We are not even at contract stage yet.
No, there will be some of those.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the vehicle fleet. Have we thought about thinking about that asset as in a different way around? It's an asset, or it's capital we have, but could we release some of the service capability of that asset to make it available to the community for them to use at some time?
That is an option we could consider.
Because I think some other councils do that, don't they?
Yeah, there is some councils using shared fleet services in more metro areas.
Yeah, because there's a lot of cars sit out in that car park on the weekend, isn't there? That
Indeed.
we could use to service some, community need that wouldn't probably fully recover costs, but it meets a social or some other need, or just thinking about.
There'd be a raft of insurance issues.
Yeah, there is a raft of risk issues associated with that.
Damage and all.
Yeah.
Minefield.
We've got an Uber fleet out there.
Yeah.
We don't have Uber in Invercargill.
Hey,
We don't have Uber.
we might. Could be an ICC Uber.
Why not? We bought a lotto shop.
Anyway, just challenging the thinking.
Okay. Unlike all the other activities just seen, this activity currently has no LTP levels of service.
How fortunate for you.
However, we want to introduce some. We want to introduce some measures that reflect the enabling and supporting role of the activity. We are at the moment proposing 3 key ones, being the percentage of requests for service under investigation and close within 5 working days of being raised. We have set that level low and aspirationally towards 95, onwards towards 95%. Recognising that would be a significant change in process, and the recording of that will have its challenges, but we've got plenty of time. The next one was the customers are provided with a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week call centre 99% of the time. That 1% is to allow for disruptions, such as if we lose the internet. And face-to-face customer services in Invercargill with some minimum hours, and Bluff with the minimum hours. And if anybody's wondering why Bluff has more hours than Invercargill, it's because of said lotto shop. And we've put another one in there, the percentage of suppliers who are paid on time. That is where it's a forward-looking one, because I suspect, looking at our cousins across the ditch, the New Zealand government will start requiring us to report that. The Australian government already requires its local government and state and government entities to report that.
What's the impasse to not paying on time? Is it technology?
Could be technology, invoice gets lost.
Argument.
It's under dispute.
It would be excluding dispute of invoice. So this is assuming that everything's okay with invoice, it's just not paid on time, or is this including dispute of invoice?
This would include disputed invoice as well.
So it's a wee bit different.
It's a little bit different. If you were trying to cut the disputes out, it would be too difficult to measure. So that's why we've allowed. Often we have a number of suppliers that still don't provide their invoices to the centralised email address. So therefore, if we don't know about it, we can't chase it for them.
Right. Yeah. And how we don't record how many invoices are in dispute, or we couldn't.
We can now, but it's just trying to get those reports. We're going to get those reports pulled together. I'm getting much closer to getting a feel.
Yeah.
That we are. It might be once we start putting these together, we might adjust these numbers, these percentages, before we put the LTP out.
And then
Just comment that it's good that the councillors actually fall into a very high percentage of being paid on time, so that's good. And the other thing is just want to talk about the after-hour call centre. I believe it's the Water Tower or something, is it?
It is, yes.
It's an extremely good service. It's probably not designed to be like that, but fortunately the people who do man it are very responsive, genuinely caring, and interested in any call that comes in. It's an amazing service, and hope that doesn't change.
good. Nobby?
Thank you.
Yeah, just reinforcing a little bit what you're saying. Surely we must be able to have that percentage of suppliers higher than 85%. If we excluded the ones that weren't in dispute, we should be able to separate that data out, because 15% of your suppliers, given that some of these are very reliant on getting an on-time payment, but low in my view,
Yeah.
a lot of the government departments would not accept that.
Well, it's just about being a good corporate citizen, isn't it?
Yeah, that is. Yep.
That's not a bad percentage. Or a normal trading business point of view, that's quite a high percentage. You should always look at what you're paying. And that's where your disputes arrive.
And this is also in recognition that some suppliers insist on 7-day terms.
Yeah.
In a large organisation,
Yeah,
that's
we're 20.
we're 20th. Our standard terms are the 20th of the month of the
So,
following
You can
invoice.
So
insist
that
as
would
much
flag
as you
up on-
like, or you can lose the business.
so that would flag up on this report then, right?
We're still working through how the report exactly would work.
Yeah.
So this is us coming up with performance measures. They might have to be tweaked as we work out how to operationalise them.
Yeah.
Just one question
sorry.
on the being paid on time. Now, with an organisation like us, the contractor gets an order number, and that's related to a quote that he submitted, and he gets the go ahead. He fires the invoice in, which has that reference number. Does it then have to go to the appropriate department to be signed off?
Yes.
Like 1, 2, 3, 4, or whatever floor.
Mhm.
Okay. And does each floor have its own sort of accounting person, or does it have to go to the individual sort of who contracted the work?
So this is getting quite operational now, councillor, but
Or they have to understand this?
so this is where you would go, come in, it would get sent to the person who raised it. They should have goods receipted or service receipted, that purchase order, that they've received it, because the finance team can't pay the invoice until they know that the services and
No, they
goods have
shouldn't.
been
So
received.
if that person's away, just like they have annual leave and everything, does that trip the system up?
They should have put a delegation in for someone else
Right.
to do that.
I mean, I've struck this personally with organisations myself in a previous life.
So the question is actually how autonomous is the system? And I think that's part of our IT investment, isn't it?
That
We're
is
going to
part of the
become more
investment.
autonomous.
It is relative. It is much better than it was.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
But it still has flaws because people can still ignore the system.
Yeah. Yeah.
It still requires someone to say, yes, I have received that.
Okay.
Still don't understand, I guess, from an accounting perspective, why we don't have figures very close to 100% right along that line. If we had a KPI that said, putting aside the non-disputed ones, for non-disputed ones, that they should be 100%, given it's 20th of the following month, we've got at least 20 calendar days to achieve that, to go beyond that, potentially 15% to go beyond that. I don't get that.
Yeah, well, I think that's where I sense you've got a bit of a gap in your numbers you're trying to measure, because you've got a few vagaries you've got to try on.
And it's also because we're not measuring. Often when you put up new measures, you'll see staff members that will put them up and go, baseline to be provided. which I could have said, let's do it in the first year to determine the baseline. I decided that that wasn't good form. So I've come up with a number that should be achievable, and jump them up. It may be that we can come to the next LTP and we'll jump them up. If we manage to get this reporting in place beforehand, we may be able to change it before the LTP goes in. And it may start at 90 or 95.
Just coming back to you again, I still don't understand why we're talking about 85, 95 bracket. I mean, why wouldn't we have a benchmark that basically says, unless it's in dispute, which can be at either end, it should be paid on time. So that's 100% as a target figure. And if you don't achieve it, then you report on why you haven't achieved it.
Yeah.
If you set the benchmark too low, potentially we could sit there and pat ourselves on the back and say, oh, look, we've done well, we've got 86%. Well, that's 15% of our clients that we're contracting work to that haven't been paid on time. Given it's not a 5-day payment, it's it could be that you put an invoice in on the first week of the month and you don't get paid to the
following 20th.
So 6 weeks later, at the shortest, it's at least nearly 3 weeks later, into the month to the 20th of the following month. Yeah, just don't get that.
That's normal terms of trade,
Michael?
Eh?
normal terms of trade.
Yeah, I know it is, but what I'm saying is, if you get paid by the 20th of the following month, that's great. I don't have any problems with that. Whether it's 6 weeks or 3 weeks makes no difference to me.
But a lot of the invoicing's 7 days, 7-day payments, so they immediately go into dispute. But it's not really a dispute. You're not going to get paid on the 20th of the following month because you can't sit down and do invoicing
Every
weekly.
day.
You do it once a month.
Michael?
Big job.
Yeah, I understand that.
Through yourself, Chair, until such time as we've made some significant changes in our contracting process to ensure that our contract terms and conditions are aligned with our payment terms, with our suppliers, which there are a number of areas where we're operating on a good faith with our suppliers, that won't come through in those stats. The stats will be based on what's in the contract. We wouldn't be able to do that in the first year because some of those terms will say the 7-day terms, but the contractor's quite happy to accept the fact that we would be 20 days, but we'd need to get the contracts amended. That's a legacy issue that we're working through. That'll take quite a bit to work through. There's quite a number of contracts in there. But if it was to have something around the dispute side of it, then you could fairly quickly work that through. But you'll never get, I would say you'd never get to 100% from that perspective. There's always those instances that have been talked about where somebody is away, and those delegations, you do need to allow that 5% slippage where that could occur, and it's not something that you can necessarily manage because it could be act of gods and those sort of things that come in that situation.
Yeah, so
just a final thing. So, when you've got a subjective target that says paid on time, I mean, that should probably say paid by the 20th of the following month. So if you say that, then the challenge is then to get your contracts with these suppliers in place so it's not 5 days or 7 days or whatever.
Yeah.
Because on time is very subjective. And,
you're right. So, paid on the 20th of the month.
Yep. And then the challenge for the staff in the first 12 months is to make sure that all the subsequent contracts they have say that 20th of the month, or make arrangements for it to be a shorter time. But that's the furthest it goes, because you don't want a situation where potentially Patricia could have somebody downstream from her in the authorisation away on leave, and nobody else is authorising the payments, and so it's the 20th of the following month, and then you got the disgruntled customers saying, "Hey, this is not good enough. We've got cash flow issues."
Yeah.
That would never happen,
Eh?
Last one.
That just look. This 20th month is. I mean, my last few years of trading with my previous business, 20th of the month was draconian. I mean, we would see from very good, people we work with, the bill would come in 23rd, paid on but it was always paid before the 30th, and I think that's a more acceptable sort of thing now. I certainly got used to it running the business, and this 20th of the month, I think is, I don't know. I mean, it's
pretty standard.
But it's pretty old as well. I think the flexibility. I don't know, Barry, in your business.
Well, you've got to.
Mine's usually paid 14 days.
Yeah, I know, but your business is quite a bit smaller than the council business.
Yeah, no, but the 20th is I don't know.
It's pretty standard in large scale organisations. Anyway.
Is that all your invoicing's in by the 20th, so you get the whole month together and you sit down and pay it.
Yeah, that's right.
They don't always come in for the previous
No, that's
month,
right.
but after the end of the month.
Yeah, no, it's just a technicality.
Yeah, so you've heard the messaging, and
Yeah.
we want the highest possible standard around it, and we want to be a really good corporate citizen, I think, is the overall summary of the discussion.
Okay. So in relation to asset plans, the corporate services activities supported by both the property asset plan, but also information services have prepared an asset plan as well. And that is in relation to our plans in relation to our technology and our technology networks. And there is some significant investment being identified within there on the renewal of the technology networks. In relation to the corporate fleet, we have optimised that fleet significantly in the last 2 years. So we have running at a quite high utilisation of the fleet, and unless indicated elsewhere, we'll continue with that fleet renewal with hybrids where available. And noting that the safety rating of the fleet continues to be monitored and maximised, so we make sure that the vehicles that we do have in the fleet are sitting at that higher end of the safety rating, and that dictates what we purchase as well. And you'll notice that the fleet will, as it's replaced, is coming in white vehicles.
This might be a bit picky, but with the choice of a vehicle and standardisation, obviously, if you went, and I don't know where our European ones, the change between a Japanese or a car and a European one decided the indicators. So do we have any, because, people jump into cars, it's not their own, do we, I mean, as far as safety goes, you would hope for standardisation.
We're trying to achieve standardisation, though there is a checklist given to staff when they do jump in to a vehicle that they should do before they set off, to check which side the indicators do operate on that vehicle versus some of the other ones.
Yeah, like it's just one of those things that...
It's just like picking up a rental car. You check which side the indicators are working off, and that when you're travelling yourselves.
Are we?
Two things, I guess. One is the replacement of technology. So I guess on an ongoing basis, we have a need to dispose of computerware and upgrade. Do we have any ability to move that on to other parties, or do we just throw it away?
Where possible, we do try and move it on. I am not 100% sure if we're actually doing that. Often some of our stuff is towards the end of its useful life.
Why I ask is that we've been trying to help James Ward, who you'll know is around his esports, and one of the things that he needs computer screens, and some other companies, H&J's and others, have been providing him with what they call end of life, but it's not really end of life. It's not the hardware he's looking for, he's just looking for the terminal. So just thought that might be an option for us to help him out. The other issue was the issue, I think, earlier on, which I missed, that you said there's no opportunities for savings. So I guess, and Jo won't like this, but I mean, maybe a challenge for her could be to develop a paper somewhere along the lines that says, well, while we don't have any opportunity for savings within our current organisation, what happens if we combine with Environment Southland, or alternatively, if we get a push for amalgamation of councils, given that a lot of services you get up on the screen there are actually things that are common to all councils, could we get some economy of scale in there? And what would that actually look like? Now, I know that's not an easy report to write, and it might take some time, but I think as we go forward, that would be quite helpful to have as part of our discussion.
Yeah.
Is that something the Regional Mayoral Forum could sponsor?
Well, I mean, Michael's already flagged with us that there may be some potential in the future for Invercargill and Environment Southland to combine, which is probably not where I'd like us to go. I think it's better to combine the three councils if we go down that track and leave Environment Southland as a regional council, sitting to the side with the environmental stuff they've currently got, and add to it climate change, so that we're not all shoveling around about what sort of vehicles we should have. It should be standard across the.
Yeah.
But if we do, for accommodation needs, get into bed with them, I think it would be helpful for us to scope, what would the benefit be to our organisation? Could we share costs on quite a few of the fronts that were up there before?
Yeah, but isn't the best use of resource there that the chiefs agree that, hey, this is something they want to explore in their own organisations?
Sure.
So almost you've got a mandate. You could go and explore that, and then you don't have a mandate, so we'll just waste time and effort, would be my thinking.
Sure.
So I think it needs to come back to us from the Merrill Forum, would be how I'd see it.
Definitely.
The regional one.
Michael's not being excited by that thought. If you read the body language.
I'm trying to protect Joe.
Through yourself, Chair, happy to take it on board, but we'd be more having discussions at the moment where it's prudent to, from a location point of view, and also we actively have discussions around shared service components.
Yeah, so do it anyway.
They happen reasonably regularly. We haven't discussed at this point with any amalgamation from those sort of point of views, just being very clear.
Yeah.
But we have obviously discussed where we can share resources across, and we've got examples of that already going on around GIS, etc.
Yes, all good comments to consider. Thank you. As people are starting to move more onto digital networks, there are often less people coming through the front door. Yep. So there are lots of other duties that front of house has taken on. They do lots of the balancing of the accounts and the mail room, etc. So we do look to increase things they're doing outside of just customers walking through the door as well, particularly for that front of house space.
Yeah.
And the numbers have been reduced.
So role scopes changing.
Exactly, yeah. And they are multifunctional really across customer service now to enable them to sort of jump in and do other things.
Yeah, that's good.
That was the last slide. So anything else in relation to this activity that you want put into the activity plan?
Oh, just probably the one thing is that we've always seemed to have struggled. This is probably something for Michael to talk about, around getting the right sort of finance people sometimes. And I guess we're now targeting IT as well, and that it's always they're a scarce resource, both finance and audit type finance, and we're pushing towards IT specialists as well. Is that going to be a sort of an area where we're going to struggle with, where we have to compete? Or is the IT specific to us, like to local bodies, or could we take an IT person that might be sitting in somewhere else? Or
through yourself, Chair, IT is an interesting one. IT is at times pretty unique in relation to the different software you are using.
Yeah.
Having said that, we're trying to push with this one council to go onto a more industry sort of platform that will have longer term benefits for the industry from that perspective. And there is a few across the country that are trained in that, so it's probably a better skill set across the local government sector, but it has a significant issue in relation to the support model across New Zealand from that perspective. So we are looking at how we can complement that from overseas as well to go through the project. We will have resourcing challenges in both areas ongoing, without doubt. They are areas longer term that we would need to consider as councils, how we resource those and support those.
I actually think it's a piece that local government New Zealand need to pick up, because this is something that every council does, these functions, right? They're vagaries to them, but fundamentally they all have IT systems, they all have finance systems. And, I know Michael and I have had the discussion, if we go and try and negotiate with an SAP or someone, we've got little clout. But if local government New Zealand went on the collective with all the councils to negotiate a package for all councils, we would get significant different service level provision and follow up and all those good stuff. So I think it's a real area that local government New Zealand can actually lean into and add value back to us as individual councils by the collectiveness of the service and the asset that we're trying to purchase.
I guess the downside of that is if we get in collectively and the government's experience this, then when you have, I don't know, 50-something councils all wanting the same technical IT people because we're all on the same platform, nobody wants to live on the West Coast. South Island, nobody wants to come to Invercargill, nobody wants to go to Kaitaia or wherever. And so while you might be not competing internationally, you're competing with your other bigger brothers elsewhere.
No, I was meaning more the purchase of the actual systems and processes that drive it.
Yeah.
There's still the staff thing, but that's a challenge we have across our entity, isn't it? We heard it this morning with the water management people. I mean, heaps of energy, but closer to the, a renewable asset.
Yeah. Well, I guess what I was getting at with my question was, once we have the technology in place that we want to do all the things that we want to do we then need to have some bums on seats in Invercargill to manage that, or can that be done from a distance? And so if we're looking for extra IT, are we looking for people not necessarily to manage that platform, but to have the sort of skill sets that we've got upstairs already, that are people that can turn their hand to a lot of different things?
Through yourself, Chair, just to highlight the technology challenges that our sector has, there's currently 78 different ways of doing technology within councils. It is possible to have one system. I think Australia has a slightly better model in place, but they still probably have a dozen or so different types of ways of doing things. Until we do have an industry push in relation to one way of doing it, then we will forever be having to have localised resource to support the different technologies. That will have the potential to be able to centralise some of those resources should we get that push as an industry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it.
That's it.
Well done. We're well ahead of time. Right, thank you. Okay, well, we're pretty much finished now, aren't we? So, process from here, just to reiterate where we get to.
Yep, so the next steps now is the asset and activity managers will take your feedback. So the more feedback you can give on those sheets, as well as what you've given verbally, is really helpful. They will finalise the draft text of the asset and activity management plans, and budget workshops will be the next step in terms of the dollars. Draft activity and asset plans will be with you either in November or December to be formally received. And that's ahead of everything being adopted prior to consultation in February.
And thank you to those that joined us on live stream.